Hello, fellow House of Leaves readers. I am here today with my notes on Appendix 2A through C. I think there's 3. A, B, C. Who knows? I'm here to talk about Appendix 2 of House of Leaves and my notes on it. As always, you can follow along. I have my notes available in Google Docs, so they will be available for you to look through as well. I just go through and say a bit more in the videos if you want to watch. I'd appreciate it. I don't make any money or anything off this. I just like the attention. Not really. I'm just going to shut up now and get along with the book. Okay. Do it. So we're going to start with the sketches and Polaroids. I'm not going to put my hand on the book because it turns it out of focus. This is my second time filming because the first time was completely out of focus because I kept focusing on my hand instead of the book. So you're just going to have to know what I'm talking about. Things are highlighted, so it should be easy enough to follow along. So yeah, the first image at the top there is of Navison falling on the rope. And the second image, if you look closely, is of the staircase, the spiral staircase. At the bottom we have this code, and I thought it could possibly be a hex code. I know Mark Z. Danilowski was really interested in like early internet coding and stuff like that. So I looked up the hex code, and it is this lovely shade of blue. And then on this next page here, we have more images, sketches, and another hex code, which is this shade of bluey purple, more blue, I'd say. Yeah. And over on this side, we have references to 20 cubits up here. We have a reference there. And that is a biblical measurement. From 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 2, instructions given to King Solomon to build the first holy house, the Jerusalem temple. It's supposed to be 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. And a cubit is the length of a forearm, and we know that forearms are significant for Johnny, specifically in regards to the scars that he has on them. In the bottom right here, these words are found in the footnotes on page 400. And I forgot to put the hex code in for this one. So 046665. And 666 is the number of the beast. And the beast in House of Leaves. Possibly the Minotaur. So I'm just going to write the hex code 046665. Number of the beast. And it's the shade of green. Yeah. And then we have on the next page, again, another hex code, and it's the shade black. And we don't know whether these Polaroids are possibly sorry, I shouldn't talk and type at the same time. See page 498. Page 498 has Johnny referencing Polaroids that he's found of possibly Whalestow House, but these could also possibly be the House of Leaves house, right? The Navison house. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the Pelican poems. I apologize, these are like really tiny font. Yeah. Hopefully it stays focused on this. I'm going to try and refocus it. There we go. Okay. So the Pelican poems were actually poems that were written by Mark Z. Danilowski while he was traveling Europe. Some of them he gave to people who were kind to him. And he had this to say about them. They reveal things about Johnny's background and interest. Someone could say they reveal something about me and my own development as a writer. So I think MZD connects a lot with Johnny as a character. He also used a pelican pen, so it's probably where they get the reference from. And we also get a reference to pelican pens on page 638 as well. Yeah, he also at the time had a Bible and Shakespeare's collected works with him, so there's lots of references to Shakespeare and the Bible in these poems. An interesting thing to note too is that the font used on these poems is Dante, which is the same as Pelafina's font. So that gives us a clue as to authorship, perhaps. So the first poem is called A Palimpsest of Austere Pelican Jake, and palimpsest, I don't know if I'm saying that right or not, but it means a manuscript that has been erased for reuse of paper, or because we know that Marksy Danilewski was interested in early computer things, it could be a memory that has been erased and rewritten as a computer term. There's a reference to Prospero's dreams, and this is from a speech that he made in Act 4, Scene 1, where he talks about how none of this is real, it's all a dream. And the quote is, "Our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you. We're all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-clapped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rock behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep." So there's some interesting reference there. Our actors, our characters, are all spirits. They're not real. We have references to the great globe itself, which was Shakespeare's theater, a place to pit on productions and plays, movies, perhaps, modern day movies. Hopefully you understand what I mean, that the Navison Record is a movie, and it could be the version of theater, an evolution of theater, one could say. And this idea that things leave not a rock behind. We know that things disappear in the house as well. So I thought it was interesting. We get a reference to mutinous, or mutiny. Let's see the words that are highlighted there. So we have reference to Hudson's Mutiny on page 137. I usually flip back and forth, but as I said, I had problems with the focus, so I'm not going to do that. I'm sure if you look at page 137, you can find the word mutiny written there yourself. And then we get a reference to raising a son, or could it spelled S-U-N, or could that possibly be son, S-O-N? Because we know we have a lot of questions about Johnny's paternity, right, and whether or not he's actually real. Let's go move that down. Pelican considers a cha-cha with a Long Island iced tea in hand, and I like adding fun notes to this as well. So I said, this reminds me of a Fall Out Boy song title. I think those really long emo song titles. Yeah. So we have this, I like interesting words as well, so I'll always give you definitions of these weird words. I find tumescence, which means a swelling, especially of erectile tissue. And then we get cut by Cain, so a reference to Cain and Abel. And chapter 11 of House of Leaves was all about biblical brothers. Then we have Pelican Jake on the, I should have looked up how to pronounce this. I've been saying Eurydice, so that's what I'm going to go with. It's probably not correct, but that's what I'm saying. Eurydice is referenced multiple times throughout House of Leaves, along with her husband Orpheus. So she was the wife of Orpheus, and that's who he went back to hell to rescue, but he ended up failing. And they're referenced, as I said, many times throughout House of Leaves. And then we have this phrase, "and in her passing my madness passed," and I thought maybe this could be a reference to how Pelafina's death clears a path for sanity, or insanity, for Johnny. Next poem is Pelican's Juvenile Metempsychosis. And metempsychosis, it means the transmigration of the soul, or like reincarnation. We get a reference to blind man, and every time I see blind man, braille, anything like that, we automatically think of Zampano, because he was blind. We get a reference to another blind character, and again, Gloucester is what I'm going to say. He's a character from King Lear, and he's blinded for fathering an illegitimate son. So, could that be a reference to Zampano being Johnny's father? The next poem is Pelican's Cocktail Mythology, and he references these three muses. And those are the Boeotian muses, not the Greek muses, because there were 9 Greek muses. There were only 3 Boeotian muses. One was born from the movement of water, another who makes sound by striking the air, and a third who is embodied only in the human voice. I thought that was interesting. And those 3 names are Ioide, sure, voice and song, Meliti, which is about thought and meditation and practice, and Mnemi, which is about memory. And then on to the next page, this page here. Move my pen so I don't hide notes there. We have this poem called Pelican's Promontory Dance. And promontory means a high point of land over water or land, and could be a reference to all the mountaineering and those kind of references in House of Leaves. We also get a reference to Hyperion, and that means he who walks on high. That's an unfinished poem by Keats, which was about a personal quest to find truth and understanding. And then it's also the Titan personification of the sun. But the reference is actually completely Hyperion curls, and that's from Hamlet. And this is from a scene, Act 3, Scene 4, lines 63 to 68, where Hamlet is chastising his mother for marrying his father's brother. He says, "Look here upon this picture, and on this, the counterfeit presentment of 2 brothers. See what a grace was seated on this brow, Hyperion curls, the front of Jove himself, an eye like Mars to threaten and command, a station like the herald Mercury." So I bolded obviously here the counterfeit presentment of 2 brothers. Could this possibly be a reference to the Navison record being fake, the 2 brothers being counterfeit? And then Mars is referenced throughout House of Leaves as well. Pelican misunderstanding a portentous sign. It's pater, sir. Pater is Latin for father. Pelican's worrisome wake. We get this reference to a semiotic, Eleotic dream. And there's lots of references to dreams in T.S. Eliot's work, but I liked this one best, that says, "Can we only love something recreated in our own imaginations? Are we all in fact unloving and unlovable? Then one is alone, and if one is alone, then love and beloved are equally unreal, and the dreamer is no more real than his dreams." So again, raises the questions of what is and isn't real in House of Leaves. Who was created from imagination and who was real? It also reminded me of this quote from Edgar Allan Poe, who's quoted frequently throughout House of Leaves as well. "All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream." We also get a reference to Proust. That's how I'm saying his name. And I'm going to say it as I don't care. Proust, you know what I'm talking about. He had this to say on dreams. "When the mind has a tendency to dream, it is a mistake to keep dreams away from it, to ration its dreams. So long as you distract your mind from its dreams, it will not know them for what they are. You will always be taken in by the appearance of things because you will not have grasped their true nature. If a little dreaming is dangerous, the cure for it is not to dream less, but to dream more, to dream all the time. One must have a thorough understanding of one." We also get a reference to Sledgehammer Harmony, and I thought that might be a reference to the song by Peter Gabriel. Maybe, possibly. Repeatedly throughout the poems and throughout House of Leaves, we get a reference to this guy Quisling. He was a Norwegian guy who collaborated with the Nazis during World War II. So it's a term that's come to mean traitor, someone who collaborates with the enemies. We also get a reference to hawthorn bread. And hawthorn is a tree, sometimes called the bread and cheese tree, because kids would eat the leaves during times of famine to like satiate their hunger. So it's like fake, something like a fake bread. Then we get this quote. I love this. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but an alarm clock. This is another reference to a T.S. Eliot poem, The Hollow Men, which says this is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. And I highly recommend you read The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot. It's one of my favorite poems of all time. Okay, we get a reference in this poem called On the Lining Brim of Being Brow Shy. Petite Gas 1857 is an actual hat store in Denmark. It's still open and operating. And then we have a reference to In the Lock of a Heart. Could be possibly a reference to Polyphena's locket. The Still Concordance of a Summertime Memory or Gaze, whatever you will. Easel seems to be a person, but it could mean easel, meaning like a artist's easel, or IZLE, easel, which means spark or hot ash. And then we have this cool word, semanteme, which is an individual unit of meaning. So it's a word that expresses a definite idea. And then we have mauve word, which is a shade of purple, which is associated with Polyphena. Okay. Oh, I just gotta put my notes back there. Okay. Let's get that refocused again. Sorry, my hand. Okay. Focus. I really hope that's focused. I'm not filming it again if it's not focused. You can pit up with it being blurry. Sorry. The President of 1815, Calamity of Conscience. 1815 was the Battle of Waterloo. That was the big event of the year. We have this phrase, this word, it's made up, and I'm not gonna say it right. Brobdingnag, which are the giants from Gulliver's Travels. We have a reference to Lions Belfast Fair, which is a reference to Lion's Mound, which was an artificial hill constructed to commemorate a spot on the battlefield of Waterloo where the king's son was wounded. Victor Hugo in Les Miserables has the Duke of Wellington to say about it that it has been disfigured for the sake of glorifying it. Maybe that could be a reference to what we are doing to House of Leaves. We are disfiguring it, cutting it up into pieces, building things on top of it that are maybe artificial in nature, trying to glorify and understand the book. Melon Brick, I was trying to find a meaning for this, but just like the next two poems, one's about a melon and one is about a brick of butter. So that's the only thing I could find. And then we have this French phrase, c'est champ sinister, la fuite des giants. Listen, I have a hard enough time with English. My French and other languages are going to be absolutely horrible. This is from a poem by Victor Hugo called The Expiation, which is a poem about Waterloo. So this whole page is about Waterloo, it seems. And the translation of that into English is This Sinister Field, the Flight of Giants. We have this title, Pelican transpires by his cup of tea and decides to try his hand at conjuring. And this reminds me of a phrase used in Borges' The Other Tiger, which is referenced on page 313, about conjuring tigers and the idea of three different tigers: the real tiger, the tiger you think of when you think of a tiger, and then the tiger that you try to conjure on the page when you're writing about it. Okay, on to page 577 here. Another reference to Quisling. Quisling loses himself for the compass. Quisling's a traitor. Holloway got lost in the labyrinth. Because you get lost without direction, and he was a traitor. And as I said before, Quisling was referenced at least 6 times throughout House of Leaves. We get this word transubstantiation. In this poem specifically, and actually the next one too, there's a lot of references to Catholicism. Doesn't say, Nice, Toledo, Rome. He's in some very Catholic places there. So transubstantiation is to convert one substance into another. It's the doctrine of the Eucharist in Catholicism, which is about converting the body and blood of Christ into the bread and wine. We also get references to possibly tarot cards. The Hanging Man. I don't know much about tarot cards, so this was just like me Googling what does this mean in tarot. So the Hanging Man is about punishment for traitors, ultimate surrender, sacrifice, and being suspended in time. And the Moon Tarot card is about illusion, deception, something not being as it appears, and unusual dreams, and a release of fear. We have a reference to the driver grins a la St. John, and I should have had this here, but this is a reference to a painting of Salome holding St. John's head. She was the daughter of Herod. There's various paintings here, but we'll open image, new tab. Bring up this image. Oh, that's huge. This image here. She Herod asked her what she wanted for her birthday, and she said, St. John's head on a platter. So there you go. Yeah, they said lots of references to Catholicism. And I say Catholicism in specific as opposed to Christianity, because a lot of these things are specifically for Catholicism. We get a reference to this word paraclete, about an advocate or helper, the Holy Spirit, and the whole phrase of a bird, a plane, no, the paraclete. I want to say paraslite, but I think it's paraclete. I'm not entirely sure. Could be a reference to page 484. If you look at that page, it looks like it could possibly be either a bird or a plane, but maybe it is in fact the Holy Spirit. It is a reference possibly also to pilots, and Johnny's dad was a pilot. Next page. This one off and then focus on this, please. Okay, hopefully that's focused. Okay, page 578. We have this phrase at the top there called, and when I learned to read again, what I read wasn't what I'd read before. And I thought that was interesting. The experience that we have as readers, the completion of a text brings a different perspective. So once we've completed House of Leaves, I didn't make my notes until my second go around on House of Leaves, and then added more on the third go around on House of Leaves, because you understand more of the text and more of the references, and things that are happening in it on another reread, and you change as a person too. Coming to it years later, hopefully you've changed as a person and bring a different perspective to it. We get a reference to a Franciscan cross. That's a misspelling. It should be a Franciscan cross, also called the Tau cross. That's what it looks like. It's just like a T. It's associated with St. Anthony and St. Francis, and Pope Innocent III as well. So he used it to mark 3 types of people to prevent their extermination during the Pope's intention to cleanse Jerusalem, following some scandals during the Crusades. So the 3 people he prevented their extermination was those who enlisted in the Crusades, those who fight against heresy, and sinners who commit to reforming their lives. It represents a journey never completed this side of heaven, and the Tau reminds us of St. Francis saying, "Let us begin again." So, going around in circles. The circling bacchanal, speaking of circles. So bacchanal is a reference to the Bacchanalia, which is a drunken orgy, a mystery cult dominated by women. It was an initiation ritual into the cult, symbolized a descent into the underworld and a rebirth. So we got a lot of references to hell, or the HoL, hell. Orpheus going into the underworld. We got a lot of references to different versions of hell in the underworld. So yeah, this is fitting with that. There were rumors that during the Bacchanalia there was child molestation and ritual murder. So again, the question of children dying, specifically in reference to Johnny, and that reference to the baby in the hospital that died. We have this phrase here: "There's not time enough to count all the way," which reminded me of the poem "How Do I Love Thee, Let Me Count the Ways" by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Just thought maybe that could be it. Then we have a reference, so Jacob's death, Dali Ho Esau, which could be a reference to that whole chapter on brothers, chapter 11. Okay, next page, 579 here. We have this phrase, can't see, can't hear, can't find, which reminded me of don't touch. I'm going to look up the full translation of this because I didn't write it down here. So I'm just going to copy and paste this because it's a similar in the way it is phrased. Translate. Don't Google. Don't touch me, don't read me, don't see me. Don't me. And this reminded me of this wall still letter was not included in House of Leaves, the book, but it was in a separate publication called the Whale Still Letters. And a letter dated March 9th, 1983 from Polyphena that says, "I can't see you, I don't remember you, why won't you?" It could also be a reference to Amazing Grace, for I was blind, I can't see, and now I see, for I was deaf, I can't hear, and now I hear, for I was lost, can't find, and now I'm found. This phrase, uxorious man, I thought that was very interesting word. It means very devoted and submissive to one's wife, and uxoricide is the murder of one's wife. Then we have a phrase that says, the catechism followed a violent protest which followed the innocent expression of a wandering idea, which reminded me of like the 96 Theses of Luther, which caused the Reformation. So all the violence that followed the Reformation caused by this expression of an idea by Luther, against certain catechistic ideas in the Catholic Church. Zenithic comes from zenith, which is a point in the sky vertically above a given position, or it could also mean the highest point in the sky reached by a celestial body. So, really, really high. Next page, 580. I'm paranoid, so I'm just going to check real quick that this is... Why aren't you focusing? That's a bit better, isn't it? Is it focused? Focus. Sorry. That's annoying. Okay. Anywho. 580. That's the page we're on. Shakespearean mother. Or Shakespearean trouble. Shakespeare's troublesome. We also get a reference to a Shakespearean mother on page 21 in reference to Polyphena. And this could also be a reference to Shakespeare's Memory by Borges. The German quote that they use on page 366 is taken from an essay called Shakespeare's Memory by Borges, which is about mistakes made in Shakespeare. And as we know, in House of Leaves, there are no errors. So I thought that was interesting. We get a reference to a biblical character of Elihu, who is a critic of Job in the Bible, found in chapters 32 to 37. He insists on divine providence and that it's full of wisdom and mercy. He was an angry young man, and then all of a sudden he disappears at the end of chapter 37, never to be heard of again. We get this French phrase in verre d'eau, which is French for a glass of water. It was the nail, that quote appeared. That reminded me of Richard III, for want of a nail, the kingdom was lost. So you know the phrase, a horse, my kingdom for a horse. Richard III exclaims, because the horse lost a shoe because the nail wasn't properly put in. So it's about like these small things leading to big consequences. So if the nail had been in the shoe of the horse, he wouldn't have lost that battle. Yeah. So, yeah. Then we also have this reference to, he tapped his fingers playfully on the wall. Tap, tap, tap. That's 3 taps. That's like Jed tapping out SOS, which is 3 taps. The 3... I can't remember if it's 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, or if it's 3 long, 3 short, 3 long. But, you know, if you do it repeatedly enough, hopefully people will understand what you're trying to say. Yeah. And interesting thing, the last quote of the Pelican poem is I'd like to return one day, if only for a little while, to drink something warm. And page 9, we are told how the Navison record begins with a drink on the porch, which is almost literally how the Navison record begins, with Bill Navison relaxing on the porch of his small old-style heritage house, enjoying a glass of lemonade. Okay. Appendix 2C. These collages. Oh, let me just put my notes back here. Okay. I'm just going to check again because it's very important that you see these, that this is, in fact, in focus here. I don't know why it's not focusing. Do I have to go higher up? Refocus. It's my screen baby. No, that looks a bit better, doesn't it? Sorry, guys. I hate editing. So you're going to get all of this in there, because I'm not filming this again. I'm not. Okay. So let's look at this collage. I'm going to point things out with a pen. This red piece of tape here says Yale Laboratories. On page 490, we get a little thing down in the corner here. It can be hard to miss. There's a star, and it says Yale. And the previous page before that says the processing lab. So the processing lab for House of Leaves, the videos, was Yale Laboratories, which is a real place. We have over here, oh, where is it? Right here, reference to project ID 87852. The missing numbers are 341. You know, I wonder if that's a hex code too. Let's just hit in all 8785231. It's like a red. Anyways, oh, what is just 87852 then? No, there's not one. Okay. I just chase every inclination that comes along when it comes to House of Leaves, which is how I ended up with almost 160 pages of notes. So this is a reference to Karen. If you look on page 535, that's her project number for psychiatric thing. We get this quote here, partial quote, but it's from Cicero, that says, a room without books is like a body without a soul. It's also quoted by Harold Bloom on page 359. This page over here with the pictures, right here, is a Horn book, which is a learning primer. Fix the camera again. And we get the words V for vine, W for whale, C for cat, T for Turk, and S for sun. Right here we have a picture of Borges winking. He's referenced throughout House of Leaves. We have this Italian article here and I got a partial translation of it. Ettore Montagna, an athlete weighing 118 kilograms, lost his sight with his job because the optic nerve is severely affected by barley, and just think about it once, you never recover. So Ettore Montagna is not a real person. Montagna means mountain in Italy, and Ettore is the name of a mountain in Italy. So mountaineering is important in House of Leaves. We have stamps of Edgar Allan Poe's face up here, and that could be a reference to Mark Z. Danilevsky's sister, who goes by the stage name Poe, and Edgar Allan Poe is referenced in House of Leaves. These matches down here are swan matches, swan vestas, and they are referenced on page 466. And then this thing I've talked about multiple times before. It is different footnotes would reference these symbols. This next collage here, up here, we have Jack London stamps. He wrote adventure stories. His most famous story is Call of the Wild, about a dog taken from civilization who becomes more wild as a sled dog in Alaska, where he's forced to fight to survive. And I like that Jack London had this to say on writing Call of the Wild. Time and again, and many times in my narratives, I wrote, speaking of my dog heroes, he did not think these things, he merely did them, etc. And I did this repeatedly to the clogging of my narrative and in violation of my artistic canons, and I did it to hammer into the average human understanding that these dog heroes of mine were not directed by abstract reasoning, but by instinct, sensation, and emotion, and by simple reasoning. So this idea that you lose your sense of reasoning, and abstractness and humanness and civilization in these wild places. Jack London is also quoted on the epigraph on page 80. The book isn't Call of the Wild, though. It's a different story. We have this article over here, and it's on two books. One is called Shadows of the Mind, A Search for the Missing Science of Consciousness, which is about science not explaining the mind completely, and a discussion on artificial intelligence. And again, I always recommend going to archive.org or Open Library, and you can actually borrow these books. I'm not going to borrow it right now because it will show my full name on there. So you can actually borrow these books that are referenced in House of Leaves. Here's another one right here. The Anatomy of Mountain Ranges by J.P. Schaer and J. Rodgers, which is this book referenced over here. So you can see the book there, The Anatomy of Mountain Ranges. And this one you can't look inside like this one, but you can search for like quotes and stuff in it. And then we have this other, this table here, over here in the corner. And I actually printed it out. I screenshotted it and printed it out here to get the full table. It took me a long time to find that table, man. I went through every page of that book looking for it. It's from this book called Physiology of Man in the Desert. Yeah. And this is a table found on page 279 about days of expected survival in the desert under two conditions. And the numbers are about walking at night until exhausted and resting thereafter. And I thought this was an interesting quote from that page about accuracy and scientific data. So we know that in House of Leaves there's a lot of like trying to scientifically analyze the house. And I think this quote is relevant to that. So I'll just read it. Its accuracy is unknown, for we have found no reliable data upon survival or death of men without water in the desert. There are stories recounting the experiences of many men. We have traced some of them, but every one of them is colored by personal views, and is without measurements of atmospheric conditions or of distances traveled. Actually, only a trained and interested scientist would be likely to report an incident with sufficient acumen to satisfy the present need. Even he would not be aware of his environment if he were the victim. We still believe it is possible that enough authenticated instances could be gathered to yield empirical knowledge of the limited conditions which average men have survived in the desert. So this idea that if you are the one going through this experience, it is hard for you to remember or to even think about collecting scientific information and accurately doing so. Because imagine like you're dying of thirst in a desert, you're not going to stop to, hey, I wonder what the current humidity is here, you know, and also page 534, which references Army manual pages. The page of that it references is about finding water in deserts. We also have right here a pelican label for the pelican pens. We just went through the pelican poems. Here we have a reference to Whisky A Go Go, which is interesting. So this is a nightclub in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard, and it is close to Holloway Drive. I just thought that was interesting. None of the other street names are relevant, I think, but Holloway Drive I thought was pretty cool. And a go-go means abundance in French, and it's actually okay. It's a reference within a reference within a reference within a reference about a real event. So the Hollywood bar is named after a bar in Paris, which took its name from a movie called Whiskey Galore. That movie is based on a novel, and the novel was based on a real-life event about a ship crashing into a Scottish island while it was full of whiskey. So it's a real event, inspired a novel, inspired a movie, inspired a bar in Paris, which opened up another bar in Hollywood. So like this nesting egg of references, like House of Leaves, like it was possibly a real event that inspired a movie, that inspired a novel, that inspired Johnny, that inspired X's readers. It's I thought that was interesting. Then we have these characters here, and they could be Chinese or Japanese. They mean the same thing anyways. In Chinese they mean true, flow, and forever. In Japanese, I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know. I think this is relevant. This is a guy put this on the Mark C. Danilewski forums. So yeah, so this in Japanese it's composed of kanji shinma, ryu nega, and kiyu hissa, which means true, flow, current, style, and long time. So essentially the same thing as the Chinese ones, but it could be read as ma-ru-ku, which would be a Japanese way of saying mark. So like Mark C. Danilewski. Here we have Pink Dot, which is actually a grocery delivery store that used to be, I don't know if it's open anymore. It's a delivery grocery store that was in LA. Johnny ordered a sandwich from here on page 149. We have the Williamsburg Days Inn, referenced here. And on page 408, we learned that Karen checks into a Days Inn in Virginia, and Williamsburg is in Virginia. We get this phrase down here, Carthage must be destroyed. On page 34, we get that quote not in English. I can't remember what language it's in, but it's not in English. This is the translation. This brown image up here is of Florence, Italy, specifically of the Santa Maria del Fiore Cathedral, which is interesting architecturally. There's a lot of architectural references throughout House of Leaves, so this was interesting, is that there's a bronze pinhole in the cathedral's dome that projects a sunbeam onto a floor meridian to mark the summer solstice. Oh, that was interesting. Then we have some actual buttons up here. These are buttons. Buttons are found in Zampano's room. We see that in the introduction on page 16. And then on page 150, Johnny loses his buttons, or Johnny mentions his buttons, and on page 514, he loses them, I believe. Yeah. Okay, we're almost done. Thank you for sticking around. The last thing we are going to talk about is the obituary of Johnny's possible father, the father who raised him. Yeah. So, We are told that he was a pilot. On page 484, the text is shaped perhaps like a plane. We've talked about that already. Is it a plane? Is it a bird? Is it a paraclete? Who knows? We get a reference to this guy, R. William Notes. And that is actually an anagram of William Rustin. So did, he know Johnny's father? And there's a lot of interesting intersections now from here point on between Navidson and Johnny's life. So, Dorset, Vermont is mentioned. On page 527, this is where Navidson and his family move after their experiences with the house. It's also the birthplace of Bill W., who's the founder of AA, and Tom has experience with AA. We find that out on page 320. It's also home to the largest cave in New England, the Aeolus Cave, or the Dorset Bat Cave. From Wikipedia, it says, the cave is unusual in Vermont for not only its size, but also its complexity. The cave has multiple levels, with several large rooms, as well as tight crawls and chimneys. I just thought that was interesting. We get a reference also to Marietta, Ohio, which is very close to the border of West Virginia, which is where the house is located. And on page 78, Johnny mentions Ohio. And the reference there is, I was his boy, though he wasn't my father, which is in reference to the foster father that he had. We also get a reference to Alaska, so we know Johnny's been to Alaska when he was 13. He mentions that on page 20. And then Pelafina again mentions Alaska on page 616. And then we also get a reference to Norway, which is where the Atrocity sank. We find that on page 298. So that's it. Those are my notes on Appendix 2 of House of Leaves. The next section is the Whalestone letters, and I hope you are ready for the descent into madness that is Pelafina. And thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Appendix 2 of House of Leaves, and I hope you're enjoying your reading experience. Thank you so much for watching.